Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to talk about cranial bones, and here at the side you can see the colorful diagrammatic representation of skull showing different bones in different color for the reference. So let's start our topic with introduction. Cranial bones form the protective outer shell of the brain and makes up the cranium of skull cap. These bones are part of axial skeleton and serve to encase the brain, support facial structure and provide attachment points for muscle. In total, there are 8 cranial bones that are tightly joined together by immovable joints called sutures. These bones are crucial for both structural support and protection of central nervous system. List of cranial bones. Human cranium consists of 8 bones: 1 frontal bone, 2 parietal bone, 2 temporal bone, 1 occipital bone, 1 sphenoid bone, and 1 ethmoid bone. Each of these bones has a unique shape, location, and function within the skull. First, now let's talk about these bones one by one. First, we have is frontal bone. As you can see here in diagram, yellow color bone in front region is the frontal bone. Location and structure. Frontal bone is located at the front of skull and forms the forehead, the roof of eye sockets, and part of cranial floor. Key features of frontal bone include frontal squama, that is the vertical part of frontal bone that forms the forehead. Second, it has supraorbital margin, that is the upper edge of the eye socket, as you can see here in the diagram. Third is frontal sinuses, that are air-filled cavity that lightens the bone and contributes to the voice resonance. Now let's talk about functions of frontal bone. First, it protects the frontal lobes of brain. Second, it supports the structures of forehead and upper face. Third, it contributes to the roof of orbits. Next bone is parietal bone, as you can see here in diagram. The purple color bone just behind the frontal bone is the parietal bone. Location and structure of parietal bone. Parietal bones are a pair of large curved bones located on the sides and roof of cranial cavity. They are situated behind the frontal bone. Key features of parietal bone. These bones meet at the midline of skull at the sagittal suture. They join the frontal bone at the coronal suture, occipital bone at the lambdoid suture, and temporal bone at the squamous suture. Functions of parietal bone. They form the upper sides and roof of cranium. Second, they provide protection for superior portions of the brain. Third is temporal bone, as you can see here in diagram. The blue color bone just below the parietal bone is temporal bone. Location and structure of temporal bone. Temporal bones are located on each side of skull, below the parietal bone, and near the base of cranium. Key features of temporal bone. First is zygomatic process that forms part of cheekbone. As you can see here in diagram, the process of temporal bone going towards the zygomatic bone is called a zygomatic process. Second is mastoid process, that is a bony prominence behind the ear, which contains ear cells and serves as a muscle attachment point. Third key feature is external auditory meatus, that is the ear canal. As you can see here in diagram, the opening is the external auditory meatus. Next is styloid process, that is a slender projection for muscle and ligament attachment. Next feature is mandibular fossa, that is a depression that forms the temporomandibular joint with the mandible. As you can see the place where the temporal bone and the mandible is joining with the temporal bone, there is the fossa that help in joining or making the temporomandibular joint, that is called as mandibular fossa in the temporal bone. Next, let's talk about the functions of temporal bone. First, they protect the sides of brain including the temporal lobes. Second, they house the structure of the middle and inner ear. Third, they serve as a base for muscles involved in chewing and head movement. Now let's talk about next bone, that is occipital bone. Here at the diagram you can see the pink color bone just behind the parietal bone and temporal bone is the occipital bone. It is unpaired bone, that means there will be one occipital bone in every skull. Location and structure. Occipital bone is located at the back and base of skull. Key features of occipital bone. First is foramen magnum, that is a large opening for the spinal cord to connect to the brain. Second is occipital condyle, that articulates with the first cervical vertebra, that is atlas vertebra, allowing head movement. Third is external occipital protuberance, that is a raised palm where neck muscles attach. Functions of occipital bone include: it forms the posterior base of skull. Second, it protects the occipital lobes of brain. And third, it allows passage of spinal cord and support head articulation with the spine. Next bone of the cranium is sphenoid bone. As you can see here in diagram, the orange color bone In front of temporal bone, below parietal bone, and behind frontal bone is sphenoid bone. It is unpaired bone that measures one sphenoid bone in every skull. Location and structure of sphenoid bone. Sphenoid bone is a single complex bone located in the middle of the skull, in front of temporal bone, and extends across the base of skull. Key features of sphenoid bone include body of sphenoid, that is central part of sphenoid bone containing sphenoidal ear sinuses. Second feature is greater and lesser wing. As they project laterally from the body, there are two wings on each side, that is greater wings of sphenoid bone and lesser wings of sphenoid bone. Third we have is sella turcica, that is a saddle-shaped depression that houses the pituitary gland. Fourth we have is pterygoid process that extend downward and serve as a muscle attachment point. Functions of sphenoid bone. First, it acts as a keystone of cranial floor, articulating with all other cranial bone. Second, it protects the brain and supports structures of face. Third, it contains opening for cranial nerves and blood vessels. Next bone is ethmoid bone. As you can see here in diagram, the dark green color bone in the orbital cavity is the ethmoid bone. Location and structure. Ethmoid bone is a light spongy bone located between the eye sockets behind the nasal bone. It forms part of nasal cavity and medial wall of orbits. Key features of ethmoid bone include cerebriform plate or cribriform plate that contain tiny holes for passage of olfactory nerve. Second feature is costa galli, that is a vertical projection for the attachment of brain's dura mater. Third is perpendicular plate of ethmoid bone that contributes to the formation of nasal septum. Fourth is ethmoidal ear cells, that are tiny air-filled cavities that are part of the paranasal sinuses system. Fifth is superior and middle nasal conchae, that are curved bones that increase the surface area of nasal cavity. Functions of ethmoid bone include: first, it supports the nasal cavity and nasal septum. Second, it contributes to the medial wall of the orbits. Third, it provides passage for the sense of smell. Now let's talk about cranial sutures. Cranial bones are joined by immovable joints that are called sutures. They include coronal suture, that is between frontal and parietal bone. Sagittal suture, that is between the parietal bone. Lambdoid suture, that is between parietal bone and occipital bone. And squamous suture, that is between parietal bone and temporal bone. These sutures are fused in adulthood, providing a rigid and protective cranial structures. Functions of cranial bone. First is protection, as they encase and shield the brain from mechanical damage. Second is support, as they form the structure of head and the upper face. Third is muscle attachment, as they provide surface for attachment of facial and jaw muscle. Fourth is sensory housing, as they enclose and protect sensory organs related to hearing, vision, and smell. And fifth function is opening for nerves and vessels, as they contain numerous foramina for the passage of cranial nerves and blood vessels. Now let's talk about conclusion of this lecture video. Cranial bones are essential components of the human skeleton, uniquely structured to serve both protective and functional roles. They are articulations from the cranium which not only safeguard the brain but also support vital sensory system. Understanding these bones is fundamental in fields such as medicine, dentistry, and biology. So this was all about cranial bones. Hopefully you liked the video. If you do, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment. Thank you for watching.